Welcome to the Crazy Alchemist podcast, where alchemy, occultism, and strange history come alive.
Somewhere in the Avesta, Zoroaster refers to the spirits of good and evil as twins. That should not have been a problem. The Orthodox reading was clear. Two opposing forces within creation, locked in cosmic struggle. Good versus evil, light versus darkness. Choose your side. The theology worked. But someone asked the obvious question. If they are twins, they have a father. Who is the father? The answer was Zurvan, infinite time, an entity beyond good and evil, older than both, indifferent to the outcome of their war. And from that single question, a theology unfolded so unsettling to the Zoroastrian priesthood that they spent centuries trying to erase it from their own scriptures. They nearly succeeded. We know Zurvanism mainly through the writings of its enemies. The fullest surviving account of the Zurvanite creation myth comes not from a Zoroastrian text, but from an Armenian Christian bishop named Esnik of Kolb, writing between 441 and 449 CE in a polemic called Against the Sects. It goes like this. Zurvan, who is infinite time, offers sacrifice for 1,000 years in order to obtain a son named Ormazd, who will create heaven and earth. Then, near the end of the 1,000 years, doubt enters Zurvan's mind. Will the sacrifice be useful? Perhaps all this labor is in vain. From the sacrifice, Ormazd is conceived. From the doubt, Ahriman is conceived at the same moment, in the same womb. Zurvan makes a vow. Whichever son reaches him first will be made king. Ahriman learns of this promise, tears himself from the womb prematurely, and presents himself before his father. Zurvan looks at this creature, dark and foul-smelling, and asks, "Who are you?" Ahriman replies, "I am your son." Zurvan answers, "My son is fragrant and luminous, and you are dark and stinking." But the oath has been sworn. Zurvan grants Ahriman sovereignty for 9,000 years. After that, Ormazd will reign. The theological implications are devastating. Evil exists because the supreme deity doubted, and that doubt has consequences. The source of all things is not perfectly good. Ahriman did not rebel against Zurvan. He was produced by Zurvan, as inevitably as shadow is produced by light. And the universe is not a war between unrelated forces. It is a family quarrel. Here is the paradox at the center of Zurvanite studies. The people who believed in Zurvan did not leave us their own account of what they believed. Almost everything we know comes from outsiders writing against them. Esnik of Kolb was a Christian polemicist. Theodore Bar Konai, a Syriac scholar of the Church of the East, provided the second major version of the myth around 792 CE. Two additional versions survive, one Syriac and one Armenian, both hostile. The Zoroastrian texts that could have preserved the Zurvanite position were edited by the people who opposed it. The Bunda-Haitian, our main Zoroastrian cosmological text, describes the 12,000-year cosmic cycle, the twin spirits, the great pact between good and evil. But the name of their father has been removed. The editors de-Zurvanized the text. The 9th century Denkard, the encyclopedic compendium of Orthodox Zoroastrianism, does not merely ignore Zurvanism, it attacks it. At one point, the Zurvanite reading of a key Avestan passage is attributed to the ranting of Arashka, the demon of envy. The editors performed a deliberate mistranslation, turning a Zurvanite proof text into a demonic deception. The last Pahlavi text that preserves recognizable Zurvanite content is the selections of Zotsprom from the 9th century CE. R.C. Zahner, the Oxford scholar who wrote the most comprehensive study of the subject in English, called it the last text in Middle Persian that provides any evidence of the cult of Zurvan. After that, silence, or rather, the silence of suppression. Whatever its prehistoric origins, Zurvanism became a live political force under the Sassanid Empire, which ruled Persia from 224 to 651 CE. The Sassanid court was cosmopolitan. Under Shapur I, the royal records show Greek philosophy and Babylonian astrology pouring into the intellectual life of the empire alongside Indian mathematical science. This was the environment where Zurvanite speculation flourished. It was also the environment where opposition crystallized. Cartier, one of the most powerful priests in Sassanid history, left an inscription near Persepolis around 280 CE, recording his campaign against every form of religious heterodoxy: Christians, Manichaeans, Mandeans, Jews, Buddhists, and a group he called the Zandics, those who based their teaching on commentary rather than the revealed scripture. His insistence that heaven exists and hell exists, and whoso is virtuous will go to heaven, reads as a direct counter to those Zurvanites who deny the afterlife. Under Shapur II, a century later, the high priest, Aturpat, son of Mahrispand, submitted to the ordeal of molten metal poured on his chest to vindicate the orthodox doctrine of free will against heresy. He survived. The priesthood treated this as divine confirmation that the Zurvanite position was wrong. In 1955, R.C. Zahner published Zurvan, a Zoroastrian Dilemma, a 495-page study that remains the most comprehensive treatment of the subject in English. Zahner identified three main schools of Zurvanite thought, and while his framework has since been critiqued, the distinctions remain useful. Materialist Zurvanism was the version that scared the Orthodox priesthood most. Its adherents, called the Daris, denied the existence of the spiritual realm entirely. No heaven, no hell, no afterlife. Matter is eternal, the universe has always existed, and time is the only constant. This is, in effect, atheism with a Zoroastrian vocabulary. Fatalistic Zurvanism drew on Chaldean astrology. If infinite time governs all, then the stars become agents of fate, determining the course of human lives. Armenian and Syriac writers simply translated Zurvan as fate, which tells you how they understood it. Classical Zurvanism was the most philosophically sophisticated variant. Zurvan as undifferentiated transcendent time-space, dividing internally into reason and concupiscence, engaging directly with Greek philosophical thought. All three variants share the same root, the conviction that behind the war of good and evil stands something older and more fundamental than either combatant. If the ultimate principle of the universe is infinite time, and time is impersonal, then creation is not the act of a good deity with a plan. Evil was not chosen by a rebellious agent, it was produced by a flaw in the fabric of existence itself. If fate governs outcomes regardless of moral effort, then the entire ethical structure of Zoroastrianism loses its meaning. Why struggle for righteousness if the stars have already decided? Worse, if time does not respond to prayer, sacrifice, or ritual, then the entire priestly economy collapses. There is no one to petition, there is no judge, there is only the clock. The Persian Arabic word dari, from dar meaning time or eternity, became the standard label for this position, and in later usage it simply meant atheist. The Quran, in Surah 45:24, explicitly condemns a position that sounds unmistakably like Zurvanite fatalism. Those who say there is nothing but our present life, we die and we live, and nothing but time destroys us. That the Quran found it necessary to refute this suggests it was still live enough in 7th century Arabia to be worth arguing against. One of the most haunting images from the ancient world may be a portrait of Zurvan, though no one is entirely sure. The Leontocephaline appears in over 100 Mithric temples across the Roman world, from Ostia to York. a nude male body with a lion's head, a serpent coiled around the torso in multiple loops, 4 wings, and keys in hand. It stands on a globe surrounded by signs of the zodiac. In the early 20th century, the scholar Franz Cumont identified this figure as the Iranian Zurvan, translated into Roman religious imagery. The identification is seductive. The serpent evokes time's cyclical power. The keys control the gates between planetary spheres. But there is a complication. Several inscribed dedications at Mithraic sites use the name Arimanius, a Latinized form of Ahriman, the evil spirit. If the lion-headed figure is receiving dedications under the name of the evil principle, how can it be the transcendent time god? Roger Beck argues the figure represents Mithras' mastery over cosmic time. David Lancy sees it as Aeon governing the cosmic order. The current scholarly consensus, if there is one, is that the Leontocephaline synthesizes Persian, Greek, and Oriental concepts, and that different Mithraic communities may have understood it differently. The figure remains, its meaning does not. Around 242 CE, a young prophet named Mani presented himself at the court of Shapur I with a text composed in Middle Persian. In it, he identified the supreme deity of his new religion, the Father of Greatness, with Zurvan. This was strategic. Shapur's court was already sympathetic to Zurvanite thought, and Mani was packaging his message in terms the king would recognize. But Manichaeism did not simply adopt Zurvanism, it transformed it. In the Zurvanite myth, Zurvan is passive. He sacrifices, he doubts, he produces both good and evil without intending to. In Manichaeism, the Father of Greatness is actively righteous. He does not produce evil from his own doubt. Instead, he is attacked from outside by the forces of darkness. Mani took the Zurvanite framework, a supreme deity above the twin principles, and fixed the flaw that Orthodox Zoroastrians found unacceptable. The result was a new religion that spread from Rome to China. Zurvanite ideas, transformed beyond recognition, traveled the Silk Road inside the Manichaean shell. There is a structural parallel that troubled scholars for decades. In Zurvanism, a supreme deity has 2 sons. The elder is evil, the younger is good. The elder seizes power first, his dominion is temporary. In Bogomilism, the medieval Balkan heresy, a supreme deity has 2 sons. The elder is Satanael, the younger is Christ. The elder creates the material world, his dominion is temporary. The key distinction, Manichaeism posits a radical co-eternal dualism of light and darkness. Bogomilism, like Zurvanism, is a moderate dualism where the evil principle is subordinate to the supreme deity, a fallen sun rather than an independent cosmic force. Could the idea have traveled? The root exists on paper. Zurvanism flourished in the Sassanid Empire, which ruled Armenia. The Polycians, an Armenian-adjacent dualist sect, emerged in the 7th century in territories with centuries of Zurvanite influence. The Polycians were transplanted to the Balkans by Byzantine emperors. Bogomilism emerged in 10th century Bulgaria in exactly the regions where Polycian communities had been settled. Yuri Stoyanov's The Other God, published by Yale in 2000, traces this full chain. The honest scholarly position, the structural parallel is real and striking. A plausible transmission route exists. Documented proof of direct influence does not. The Sassanid Empire fell to the Arab conquest in 651 CE, and Zurvanism as an organized current fell with it. But ideas are harder to kill than empires. Al-Shahrastani, writing his comparative study of religions around 1127, explicitly identified the Zurvania as a sect within the Mazdian tradition. He called the myth infantile in its literal form, but acknowledged it might represent a legitimate philosophical inquiry into the relationship between the infinite and the finite. And then there is Omar Khayyam. His famous moving finger that writes and, having writ, moves on, expresses a Zurvanite fatalism so pure that it could have been composed by a Sassanid-era materialist. Time writes the story, time moves on, and human protest changes nothing. In the decades since Zainer's 1955 study, much of his edifice has been dismantled. Shaul Shaked showed that the source base for Zainer's construction was weaker than it appeared. Zurvanism was never a discrete heresy with its own priesthood and institutions. It was a variant version of the cosmogonic myth, a theological tendency rather than a sect. Albert de Young made the philological case even sharper. The Greek sources Zainer treated as early attestations of Zurvanism do not actually describe the Zurvanite system. The name Zurvan does not appear. The twin birth myth does not appear. The gap between what the Greeks reported and what Esnik described is centuries wide. De Young's conclusion, now broadly accepted in the field, Zurvanism is better understood as a cosmogonic tendency within Zoroastrianism than as a discrete heretical church. It generated real opposition. The Dinkards' attacks are not fictional. Cartier's persecution of the Zandics was real. But the image of an organized Zurvanite institution competing head-to-head with Orthodox Mazdaism is probably a modern scholarly construct. This does not make the ideas less powerful. It makes them harder to pin down. Zurvanism is extinct. No one performs Zurvanite rituals. The texts were suppressed, the temples repurposed, the inscriptions left to weather. But the question survives. What is the relationship between the origin of good and the origin of evil? Every dualist tradition that has ever existed, from Gnosticism to Catharism to the narrative structure of stories we still tell, has wrestled with some version of it. Zurvanism's answer remains one of the most disturbing. Good and evil are not strangers, they are brothers. They were conceived in the same womb, at the same moment, by the same parent. The only difference is that one was born from faith and the other from doubt. And the parent, infinite time, does not take sides. He made an oath. He keeps it. The clock runs. What happens within the 9,000 years is not his concern. If that sounds like atheism to you, you understand why the Zoroastrian priesthood wanted it erased. If it sounds like something else, something that neither the rationalist nor the believer has quite managed to name, then you understand why it keeps coming back. If you found this interesting, the full article with all sources is at crazyalchemist.com. You can find us there, on YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Until next time.
If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to visit crazyalchemist.com for more intriguing content and follow Crazy Alchemist on Instagram and Facebook to stay connected.